Hey, hey, my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, and I come on this podcast to help you shift the way you think. I've been in the mental health field for over 20 years. I've worked with people in so many different areas of their life. And so I have a pretty good idea on how we get stuck and why we get stuck, which is why I named my wellness center Shifting the Way You Think, because I do truly believe if we can work on giving ourselves new information and shift our thought process just a little bit, it can help us with how things are going. So before we get started, I want to remind you that when you're listening to this podcast, it may be helpful to have a notebook, take notes, and don't just let this be the last time you look at this content. Take time to look at this content throughout the week. A lot of the things that I'm talking about is coming from my personal experience and just my experience of working with people. Even though we come from different socioeconomic statuses, different race, color, sexual identity, whatever it is, I find that a lot of the things that we struggle with, the theme is similar, right? The way we can work on getting out of it is very similar. And today's topic is about being aware and how being aware of your behaviors is a key to change. And regardless of who you are or what you're struggling with, this topic can help you really think about things differently. So if you've never been here before, my name is Celeste, the therapist. You can find me on all social media platforms. If you're listening to me on audio podcast, this podcast does stream on Zoom, on not on Zoom. This podcast streams on YouTube, and I do some visuals to help you follow the content a little bit. So if you're not following me on YouTube, you can go to Celeste the Therapist and find my YouTube links. I also have a wellness center that's located in Stoughton, Massachusetts. So if you want to work on different areas of your life, there's workshops that we do. There's somatic work that we do. And if you're not familiar with somatic work is working with the body. A lot of times people aren't aware that a lot of their stress and trauma and pain is stored in their body. And as a therapist, I've always talked to people about working on getting some somatic work, right? And because people struggle with not finding people that look like them in these classes, it's been near and dear to my heart to work on creating a space so that people can have that. And so, if you want to learn more about my wellness center, you can go to stwyt.com. Again, that's stwyt.com, and you can find the events that are happening. If you're a wellness provider and want to host an event, you can go to that website as well to find it. All right, so let's talk about the importance of being aware. When you think about things that you're struggling with, let's just take, for instance, if you're bleeding, right? If you're not aware that you're bleeding, how can you work on putting a band-aid on and not allowing that blood to drip, right? Also, when you think about physical health, if you're struggling with some pain and you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, I don't know what's going on with you and you're in pain, you might find yourself struggling. So being aware of what's going on allows you to make changes, right? If you can start to recognize what you need, then you can begin to make changes. I think a lot of times what's happening is sometimes we're just so used to feeling how we're feeling, going on with life the way we're going on with life, and we don't think about it any different. We have a lot of automatic behaviors that we do. A lot of times it's due to us and the way that we've seen life happen, right? So there's a lot of patterns that's passed down from generation to generation. A lot of times when I think about different illnesses that are passed down, like diabetes, high blood pressure, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, that runs in my family. And I'll say, the lifestyle that you live runs in your family, the way that you eat, the way that you sleep, the way that you manage stress. And it's not like your caregiver sat you down and said, hey, Celeste, I want you to live with stress. Hey, Celeste, I want you to ignore the hard things that are happening. So a lot of times it has nothing to do with a direct statement being said. It's because of how you are in that environment. So a lot of times we don't recognize that the behaviors that we're having are automatic. So I'll just take my physical wellness and the way that I hold pain in my body. And if you're a long time listener, I've shared this story before, but at 14, I remember being in the ER because I was hunched over and my back was in so much pain. And I got so used, it was a lot of stress going on. And so I got used to the stress and not realizing how much my back was impacted by the stress that I was dealing with. And it got to the point where when I went to the ER and they didn't ask me about anything that was going on, they gave me some pills. That was it, right? And so I remember that incident. I remember what I had on. I remember it took a couple of days for my back to straighten up. And it wasn't until I started my wellness journey and I started to understand how much the body holds on to pain. And I started doing yoga like on my own on YouTube. I couldn't afford to go to a yoga studio. I'm all about starting where you are and using what you have. And I remember when I was dealing with some stress, I remember my back started hurting. And at that point, I made the connection. I was like, oh, Celeste, like when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, when you're struggling, your back starts to feel like something is heavy on it, right? And it's like, why is it that as an adult is when I'm learning this? There's no reason why we shouldn't know this. The same way I know if I'm bleeding, I can go to the medicine cabinet and grab a band-aid. I need to understand that when my body is giving me signs, I need to understand that so I can know what to do. But the issue is that nobody's asking us how we're feeling. We're not asking ourselves. We're not checking in with our body. Our body will give us signs before our intellectual, like our mind is beginning to give us signs. And so the more that you understand that, the more you can work on making changes. And so now at 42 years old, I'm able to recognize like the pains in my back or even my stomach to start to turn when I'm feeling anxious about something. Then I'll start to have self dialogue with myself and I'll be like, it's okay, everything's going to be fine. Like I literally will soothe myself by the way that I talk to myself. That inner dialogue that you have with yourself is so powerful and so important because you don't realize a lot of times you're your worst enemy. And you weren't born to talk bad about yourself or to talk down to yourself. It was based off of the experiences, it was based off of what was said to you, all of those things. So it's not your voice that's happening, it's the voice of everything that's happening, which is why giving yourself new information is so powerful because it can drown out the noise of the negativity that goes on in your mind over and over again. And so when you think about these automatic behaviors that are happening and how you just kind of make adjustments to the pain, I really want you to become more aware and really start to work through it. And so, as we're talking about this, right, and the importance of giving yourself grace as you're trying to work on these changes, because a lot of times we'll see the behavior and then we will start to beat ourselves up for it. A lot of times people don't want to take time to be mindful and understand what they're thinking because they feel bad that they're thinking that way. And I tell people, you know what, you're going to think that way, that the way you're thinking, it's going to happen whether you choose to get involved with your thoughts or not. And so I really want to shift your mindset with reminding you like it makes more sense to get involved with your thoughts, even if they're hard to like comprehend and hard to accept, because then you can work on change. Until you become aware and cultivate that awareness, it'll be really hard for you to work on creating change. So I want to like end with, so if you're new here, I don't just talk about the issue, right? I talked about understanding the importance of being aware, how we have these automatic behaviors. Another example of an automatic behavior is like people that may smoke, right, to relieve stress, not realizing every time I'm stressed, I'm lighting up. Every time I'm stressed, I'm going to the bottle. Every time I'm stressed, grabbing food because you've been doing it for so long, right? And then becoming aware will allow you to work on changing that pattern. And so I want to talk about cultivating awareness because you may say, you know what, Celeste, you're right. I don't pay attention to none of this stuff. I'm not aware of what's going on and my behaviors and how I'm doing. All I know is I want to change, but I'm not even beginning to understand how this is taking place. So let's spend some time talking about how you can work on cultivating awareness, because this is a big part of how change is going to happen. So I really want you to really understand that. So on the screen, as you can see, if you're watching me on YouTube, the first thing is thinking about mindfulness meditation. So setting aside a few minutes a day, sitting quietly can help you get into a state of mindfulness. And it doesn't have to be more than a minute. If you've never done this before, just take 1 minute, right? Increase it next week. Try 2 minutes, then 3 minutes. I'm not asking you to sit down for 10 and 20 minutes like that. That's not really realistic. You want to ease your system into like becoming aware and having these practices. When people get like a heart transplant, a lung transplant, and like literally their heart or their lung is bad, and so their system is getting a whole new heart that's way better than the one they have. Their body can literally reject it because it's a complete shock to their body. And so, as the doctors are putting that new heart and lung in, there are things that these people can't do. There are medicines that they have to take to help work on acclimating their system to this new heart and this new lung. And that's what I want you to think about when you're working on change, because a lot of times people are like, I want to do this, I want to do that. I'm like, that's cool. I love that for you. But let's slow down and pump your brakes a little bit because it's going to take time to get there. And you don't want to overload your system, right? So, as you're thinking about this idea of cultivating awareness, I really want you to think about practicing mindfulness and working on doing that like a little bit at a time. And if you say, Celeste, but when I sit down and I'm trying to be mindful, my thoughts are everywhere. Great. That's great. I love that for you because that's the first step in understanding what's going on. The second thing you could work on with cultivating awareness is journaling. Great practice. You could grab a notebook from the dollar store. I have a guided journal called 365 Days of Intentional Living, where I ask you a new question every day. I ask you how you're feeling, right? There's a ton of journals that are out there. But again, if cost is an issue, grab something from the dollar store, a nice notebook, and start your journey there. You can even go online and look up questions to ask yourself every day. I can just give you the questions that I ask my kids when we check in. We say, how are you feeling? What are you grateful for? What did you do to prepare for tomorrow? And what went well today? Right. So it doesn't have to be nothing specific, but if you're not used to writing and journaling, it'd be nice to just have some regular questions to ask yourself to get yourself into a groove. And then you might find yourself like going off on your own. There's no wrong or right way to journal, it's what works for you. But creating that practice will get you more in tune to the moment. And as I said, the questions that I ask my kids, a lot of those things allow them to get into the moment and allow them to be work on gratitude and paying attention to what they're feeling, right? So those are very intentional questions that I'm asking my kids. The third thing is self reflection, right? So at the end of each day, just take a few moments to reflect on how everything went. What did I do today that I'm proud of? What could I have handled differently, right? That self reflection daily is important. If you're like, I don't want to write, okay, that's fine. I'm not trying to force you into one direction or another. I'm just trying to help you like figure out what direction and try something. And so even if it's in the shower, if you're taking a shower every day, you're taking a bath, in the bath, let that be the time to reflect. If it's in the morning, what do I have going on today? How am I feeling? Right? If it's at night, how did today look like for me? What do I need for tomorrow? Really being mindful of it. The next thing, cultivating awareness, my favorite, body scan. Our body's going to give us signs before we do. There's a book that's really popular. The body keeps the score. The body holds on to pain. That's why I'm so into somatic work and the body work in these classes that I have at my center, because I really want people to get more in tune to understanding what their body is feeling. A great way to do it that's free, in this podcast, we're going to talk about the free ways you can get your life together is YouTube. You go on YouTube and you type in 5 minute body scan meditation. I promise you a ton of them will come up. And it'll have you sitting and they'll be like, sit straight, and they'll be like, unlock your jaw. And the next thing you know, you'll be like, dang, I didn't even know my jaw was unlocked. And then they'll be like, relax your shoulders. And if you can see me, I'm like, I put my shoulders down. You are like, dang, I didn't know I promise you, you don't realize just how wound up you are because you're so used to being wound up. The next thing is mindful breathing. Another one of my favorites. Like breathing free, we have access to it. It's so underutilized. So throughout the day, just taking moments to focus on your breath. There is, again, on YouTube, that's free. Type in breathing circle, 2 minute breathing circle, and the circle will go in and out, right? And it'll be like, breathe in, breathe out. Oh my God, that felt so good. Like literally, like just taking those breaths can help you get into the moment and release so much. A lot of times we have labored breathing. If I'm feeling stressed, I can feel myself not breathing, right? If I'm around somebody that's like stressed, and I'm like, all right, let's just take a deep breath, right? Because I'm just an energy person. So really being mindful of your breath and making intentional time to breathe. Another way to cultivate awareness is setting intentions. Setting intentions at the beginning of your day is so powerful. So, for example, you might say, today, when I notice some stress, how am I going to respond? Right? Being mindful of your intention so that you can work on creating change. The thing is we don't got intentions. We're waking up in the morning. We're hopping on our phone. We're going to social media, and God knows what we're going to see every day on social media. You got to freaking brace yourself nowadays. No matter how much you curate your feed, some of that crap is going to get in there. You're going to have conversations with people. And so I need you to understand, do I want to set my intentions with starting my day with the crap that's going on in the world and not being intentional? Or do I want to take time to be intentional and start my day with me? I don't even have my phone is not in my room at night. My phone goes to another room. Let the alarm wake me up, right? And I'm not jumping on social media. I have so much going on. I wear a lot of hats: mom, wife, wellness owner, a manager. Like, I do so much, and I can't afford to not be intentional about my life and my day. And, I was talking to somebody about why I'm so intentional, because I've been in this field for over 20 years. I've worked in the ER. I've worked in group homes. I've worked in so many different places, and I've watched people lose their mind. I feel like we play Russian roulette with our mind because we're not intentional about our day to day and what we need and what we have to do for ourselves. And so I really want you to be mindful, like, just because you may not be able to see what's happening in real time, your system is breaking down when you're not intentional. And in 2025, like, this, as I said, if you listen to the previous podcast, this is a really hard time, especially for me, because like I'm grappling with the reality of what is happening and also walking people through what's happening. And it feels really heavy. And so my intentions and the way, even with my self-care practices, since my watch was like, a few days ago, was like, oh, you have a 12-day streak of moving your body. Like, I didn't even realize just how much I've been leaning into my moving of my body practice, right? It's not just the gym, right? Because I just want to be intentional. You don't need a gym membership to move your body. You can dance in front of your TV to music, right? Sometimes I walk up and down my stairs, and I've really like honed in on it. When things are out of my control, I'm really big on looking at what's within my control. What can control that it's going to allow me to grow, right? Because sometimes when people things are out of their control, they may find themselves eating more, right? And so I really want you to be mindful of, what can I do for myself? So setting intentions is a great way to cultivate awareness. Seeking feedback is another way. So if you have like trusted family or friends, I'm not talking about no just regular Joe Schmo. I'm talking about people in your life that you love, that you have a reciprocal relationship with. You can ask them these questions and ask them, like, what kind of blind spots do you notice I have? Or is there anything that you see in me that you think I could work on? This is really great, right? Obviously, if you have a therapist, that's helpful, or a coach, but I'm talking to people that may not have that. Asking somebody in your life that you trust is important. Number 8, you can limit distractions. So reducing multitasking and the distractions in your life. So social media is a big one, right? So limit the time you have on social media. Please limit the time. I can't stress that enough. If it's 5:05, look at your time and say, okay, it's 5:05. I'm going to stay on for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Like, what are you gaining from being on there? A lot of times, social media becomes so addictive because it allows you not to focus on what you're really feeling and what's going on. And that's why when it's time to go to sleep, you can't go to sleep, because what's happening is your mind is scrolling from all the crap that you done seen, and that light is keeping you up. And then now you call yourself going to sleep, but your mind wants to keep going. And then forget just social media. What about the other problems and things you're not dealing with because they feel too hard? You think just because you go to sleep, your mind's going to go to sleep? No, it's waiting for you to answer the question. It's waiting for you to finish that task. It's waiting for you to live the life that you're supposed to live. Right. And a lot of times, I feel like our mind and body knows what we're capable of. And when we're not living to the standards of what our mind and our system knows we're capable of, we're going to be struggling with so much anxiety and so much having a hard time like sleeping and resting. When I was opening my wellness center, when I was starting my podcast, when I was starting my business, like all of these things that I've started, I wrestled with myself because I felt it in my spirit that I was supposed to be doing these things that I'm doing. And like I get filled with gratitude and emotion when I think about the time that we're in and the space that I have to offer for people. It's like, geez, like what a time to have this wellness center for people to be able to come and feel safe and feel seen and release stress, right? I feel so grateful that I was able to follow my heart and my spirit and allow myself to do this regardless of the hardness that it felt. It was very hard emotionally creating this, because this is way out of my element of what I'm used to, right? It's not something, put me in a system and be a hard worker, but you want me to create the system and create the thing, been a huge challenge. So if you follow me on social media, I talk about that a lot on my Instagram stories. And then the last two is engaging in new experiences. This can be helpful for cultivating awareness. So you could try something like a dance class or hiking a new trail. So these new experiences can help you become more aware of your reaction and behaviors in unfamiliar situations. Like I've put myself in hiking, gardening, cooking, right? Like I think the little things that I've done and really cultivated it really gave me confidence as well. And then the last thing I want to say is like really practicing self compassion, being kind to yourself while you're on this journey. I tell people all the time, like you're with yourself 24/7. So if you're with yourself 24/7 and that voice that is in your mind is always negative, how are you gonna make changes if you're beating yourself up all the time? Forget the world, forget being black in America, forget everything that's going on. If your own voice is not positive, how will you begin to create change? It's really hard to do. So I really want to encourage you to work on cultivating a self-compassionate voice. One of the things I think, as a therapist, I feel like the way that the colonizing way that you're taught is to diagnose what's wrong with you, not what happened to you. I don't remember that being part of the curriculum, what happened to you. I'm not big into diagnosis. I'm not big into labels, because what I am big into is hearing somebody's story and helping them make those connections. When you make those connections, you breathe different. You're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But because we're not making those connections, we're not being aware of what's happening. How could we work on change? And so I want to challenge you, right? Like as we're ending this session, I really want to challenge you to work on becoming aware of what is and what's going on in your life without judgment, with grace, right? With self-compassion. The voice in my head, I don't remember ever having a voice of negativity, but I was always in survival mode, always thinking like the worst case scenario, because if I'm gonna stay ready to be ready, because if something happens, I'm ready. I remember that feeling. And it wasn't a good feeling to be in that space. My system was literally breaking down on me. And so having that voice where I am saying, it's okay, Celeste, right? Where I'm telling myself, like, oh, don't worry, it's going to be okay. Try to get into the moment. Like, my voice is so much more compassionate to myself. And that's what keeps me going. I'll say, like, okay, if this doesn't work, it's okay. We'll go back to the drawing board, right? Like, have that compassion with yourself. We can be our own worst enemy. So I want to encourage you to take time out to figure out, okay, what does my life look like with awareness? What are one of these things that I'm going to try to take on to work on cultivating awareness? Because when I become aware of what is going on, I can create changes in my life. So don't forget, follow me on all social media websites. I always say, like, if you can work on believing in yourself and having faith, you can work on creating change, because if you have faith in yourself, nobody can take that from you. Also, I have a shift community. It's free, it's online. I wanted a space to get off of social media. So if you are not following me on the shift community, you could check the show notes, or you can go to my website. There's a link that you can do to sign up. And it's an app. You can have it on the app. Go in. We have two spaces in there right now, besides the discussion space, but we have a gratitude space. You can go in there and start your journey there and write in what you're grateful for. There's also a Healing Your Inner Child space. Healing Your Inner Child is a class that I do in my center every quarter, right? I started it this quarter. The next one's going to happen in April. I believe like so much of our struggle is because of our inner child and how we haven't worked on healing it. So I teach you what it is and how to work on like cultivating it and allowing yourself to be more aware of your inner child, so you're not letting your inner child create the direction of your life or the lens of your life. But you can find all of that on my website, stwyt.com. And until next time, beautiful people, I'll talk to you later.